Hello everyone, this is Ancient Magi from Gathering Wizards, and today we are going to take a look at the Apex Predators deck build. Alright, so as you can see, I've put all 90 cards back in the deck again, so we can actually sift through them and trim out the deck, you know, one by one, so you guys can see what I use in this deck and what I don't. This deck, in my opinion, is fairly underpowered for this meta game, but you know, if you trim it just right, you can actually make it fairly competitive, and it's a whole lot of fun to play if everything goes correctly. Alright, so we're going to start off by just taking a look at the cards that I absolutely do not like, and I'm going to remove right away. The first one I'm going to take a look at is Wall of Vines. Personally, I do not like walls at all. I don't like defenders that much unless they give me, you know, a great advantage of some kind. And this one, it just doesn't. I mean, sure, it has reach, it can defend against flyers, but that's not the point of this deck. The win condition in this deck is just to get out tons of creatures and then hopefully get overrun in your hand and win the game. So we're going to remove the Wall of Vines, and the next thing we're going to remove is, let's see here, the next obvious thing we're going to remove is this right here, Rites of Flourishing. This card should be pretty obvious why you don't want it in the deck. I mean, yes, land is great, you know, but you know, it's just not beneficial for you because it helps the other player as well. And there's plenty of better decks in this meta game, so it really, in my opinion, just benefits the other player just as much, if not more. You know, so this card is completely worthless, you know, for this deck. There are great decks in the real Magic game that are built around the Rites of Flourishing card, but Apex Predators just is not one of them. Alright, so the next card that's just, you know, in my opinion, garbage is Giant Spider, actually. You know, a lot of people would think, you know, hey, we should definitely keep this card in this deck because it has such little defense against flyers already, you know, as it is. But like I said with the Wall of Vines, this deck is not about defending against flyers. You are trying to defeat the enemy as quickly as possible by getting as many creatures out and just trampling them, just overrunning them. So we're going to remove the Giant Spider as well. This is an interesting card, actually, the Hunted Wumpus. I mean, for 4 mana, you can get a 6/6 out on the field, but at the same time, look at this horrible effect that it has. Each and every other player on the battlefield can lay a card down from his or her hand, or a creature card from his or her hand on the battlefield. And to me, that effect just is so bad in certain situations that it's just not worth having the card. Now, don't get me wrong, if they have no cards in their hand, or they have no creatures in their hand, or they just have like a, you know, a 2/2 in their hand, then this card could be great. The potential can be great, but you know, there's so many situations and so many decks that have good creatures that it's just not worth it. So I don't want to take the risk, so I usually leave it out. This card here, Hunter's Feast, in my opinion, just complete garbage. I don't like life gain cards. It's just, you're just delaying the inevitable, and it's just not worth it. So let's remove these cards, especially for 4 mana. My goodness. Alright, so the next card that I don't think is worth it at all is this right here, the Crawworm. I mean, just look at it. It's 6 mana for a 6/4. Okay, 6 mana for a vanilla 6/6, in my opinion, is bad enough as it is. But a vanilla 6/4 for 6 mana? No. Just total garbage. Total garbage. Let's get rid of those 2 cards. You know, while we're here, this is another one that's interesting. You know, for 6 mana, this card can be very powerful if you have, you know, if you and your opponent are drawing like a ton of cards for whatever reason. It does have Shroud, so that's a nice effect. You know, it can't be targeted by, you know, your spells or the enemy's spells. But by the time you have 6 mana out on the field and you lay this guy down, generally speaking, his attack and his attack and, you know, his defense and attack power is not going to be that strong. You're not going to have that many cards left in your hand, and neither is your opponent, usually in most circumstances. So it's generally not worth the 6 mana. There's better 6 drops in this deck, and Multani just is not one of them. So I say we remove him. Alright, so now let's go back to the beginning. We're down to 70 cards now. So now it's time to start trimming the slightly more difficult cards. Okay, So we're gonna start with Giant Growth. Fantastic card. You definitely want this in your deck. It's one of the very few removal options that you actually have in this deck. I mean, if used properly, you know, it's an instant. So if used properly, this card can easily remove some of your opponent's strongest creatures on the field. And it's a great card, one of the best cards in this deck, actually, so definitely keep it. Grix's Companion, a 2 mana, 2-drop for a 3/2 trample. In my opinion, that's a great deal. Great deal. So absolutely, keep him. Another reason that Grix's Companion is fantastic is because he has 3 attack power. And there's another creature I'm going to show you later on that benefits from any creature that has attack power 3 or more. So this is a great card all around. Definitely keep him in the deck. Nature's Lore, another keeper in my opinion. It not only is it just 2 mana, but it brings the forest onto the battlefield untapped. So it's really, in a sense, it's only costing you 1 mana. You have to have 2 mana to cast it, sure, but you get 1 mana back that you can use right away. So it's fantastic, and it's great for mana wrapping. It's good for being able to get your big creatures out much faster. Definitely keep that card, both those cards. Alright, so here's a tough one in my opinion. I really would love to be able to take Runeclaw Bear out of this deck. But, in my opinion, because the mana curve in this deck is... there just isn't enough low drops that you kind of have to keep him in the deck, because there just isn't enough 2-drops to really remove him. You need more 2-drops. So the Runeclaw Bear unfortunately has to stay, even though he's just a vanilla 2/2. Kind of sucks, but he's better than taking him out in my opinion. So here we have Borderland Ranger, 3-drop for another 2/2, but he's great in this deck because he gives you more land, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. And he gives you more land in your hand, which kind of sucks. I wish it went onto the battlefield. That'd be much better, but sometimes he's exactly what you need, because you only have 3 mana out, you have no mana in your hand, and he's a perfect drop, get you another mana, and then you can lay, you know, one of your regeneration creatures like Cudgel Troll. So he's fantastic, you know, in this deck right now. I definitely think you should keep him, and I just keep all 3 because they're well worth it. They've come in handy more often than not. Again, here's another 3-drop for a 3/3, a vanilla 3/3. He's kind of like the Runeclaw Bear in my opinion. He kind of sucks, and I wish I could take him out, but unfortunately he's kind of needed, and the main reason he's needed is because, like I said, he has 3 attack power, so he will benefit from the other creature's special ability that I'll show you later. The Dungrove Elder, my goodness, best card in the deck in my opinion. This is definitely a keeper, no questions. 3-drop for a hexproof creature that grows in power with the number of forests that you control. So he automatically is a 3/3 hexproof bare minimum, and then he just grows from there. He's a fantastic creature, very hard to kill, and he just becomes a powerhouse later on. The Elephant Guide. This isn't such a bad card. It's a 3-drop for, you know, a +3/+3 enchantment, and it actually gives you a 3/3 back. This is a tough call. In the end, because I needed my 2-drop Runeclaw Bears, unfortunately, and I have to trim this deck with, you know, some way, I decided to remove it because I'm not a big fan of enchantments, because there's so much removal in this game that anybody can just, you know, they can gain card advantage if you cast this, and then you know, and then kill your creature. Now, sure, you do get a 3/3 green elephant creature back onto the battlefield, but you know, it's just not worth it in my opinion. So I actually take it out of my deck. The Grazing Gladeheart, it's a 3-drop for a 2/2. Again, that's kind of lousy. His ability though is interesting. It's not fantastic, but it's continual life gain, and you know, throughout the rest of the game, as long as you have lands to you know, put down on the field. And you know, generally speaking, this deck is kind of slow, so it's good because it allows you to survive long enough to get your big creatures out. Although I don't like having 3 in my deck, so I usually get rid of 1. Alright, moving on. Here we have the Heartwood Storyteller. 3 mana for a 2/3. He doesn't benefit from the 3 power effect that I was talking about, but this is a fantastic card. Mainly because this deck is absolutely full of creatures. So you're not going to be helping your opponent out too much with his ability. But with many other decks in this game that you'll be playing against, you are going to be drawing tons and tons of cards as soon as this guy hits the board. He's definitely worth it. I highly suggest you keep him in your hand. Lead the Stampede. It's a 3-drop. You get to look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal any of the creature cards from among them, put them in your hand. You know, the idea is good because you want to get creatures out, but you want to be spending every single turn hopefully dropping another creature. You don't want to search for creatures and then not have enough mana to drop any more. Sure, you could cast this later on in the game, get a bunch of creatures, and then lay a couple down, or at least one, but there is a major disadvantage with this card because you do not get to keep anything but creature cards, and one of the #1 things that you want to pull in this deck is Overrun. Since Overrun is a sorcery card that will go to the bottom of your library and then you just lose it. So you risk losing the chance to grab one of the best cards in this deck that will win you the game. So I remove Lead the Stampede for that reason alone. Because it's too dangerous, you don't get to have Overrun. Leatherback Baloth, 3-drop for a 4/5. No question you're going to keep this guy in your deck. It's just too bad they don't give you more of him because he's fantastic. A 4/5 for 3, that's fantastic. Definitely keep him. Beast Hunt, it's a 4-drop. You only get to look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put all the creature cards in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. This is even worse than Lead the Stampede in my opinion. It costs more mana. You get less creatures potentially. Just isn't worth it. Also, you can lose Overrun. Cudgel Troll, good drop. He's a 4-drop for a 4/3. But the great thing about him is he gets regeneration. This can really highly benefit you in the game. Just for the simple fact that, you know, if they have, you know, creatures on the board that can kill everything you got, you just simply swing in with this guy every turn, have an extra mana left open and regenerate him, hopefully killing off some of his defenders or doing damage straight to his face. Cudgel Troll's great. You can definitely use the regeneration ability to your advantage in this deck, so definitely keep him. Definitely keep him. Keep both of them. Fresh Meat. Oh, whoops. This is a cool card actually in my opinion. I love keeping this card. It's 4-drop, but in certain situations it's an instant, so you can cast it on your opponent's turn as well. I mean, let's just say he swings in with an army of guys. You know, you don't want to take all the damage, but you also don't want to lose your creatures. But you know, hey, you know, maybe you can take out a few of his creatures at the same time by blocking or double blocking some of his big creatures, and then cast this instant right afterwards. You know, leave your mana open on your turn, knowing that he might just do that, and then boom, all your creatures come back. He loses a couple of his. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different, you know, situations where this card can come in handy. So yeah, definitely keep Fresh Meat in there. It's a great card. Serrated Arrows. Alright, so I mean, I've heard a lot of people say they don't like Serrated Arrows. It's a 4-drop. It doesn't do anything immediately. But you know, it's a removal. It's one of the few removal cards you have in this deck, and it can definitely come in handy. It's won me games before. I mean, you can kill off a 1/1, you know, by putting a counter on it. You can you know, lower the attack and defense of some of his bigger creatures just enough to kill him, maybe with a, you know, with the giant growth or whatnot. So I mean, yeah, definitely keep Serrated Arrows in. It's definitely worth it. Thrun the Last Troll, kind of like Cudgel Troll but better. He's a 4-drop for a 4/4 instead of a 4/3. He can't be countered, and he's got hexproof. His regeneration may cost, you know, 1 more mana, but I mean, he's a great creature. Definitely keep him. He's just like Cudgel Troll in some sense, but better. Wolfbriar Elemental. Here's another good one. It's a 4-drop for a 4/4. But you know, if you have the extra mana, this guy can be awesome. I mean, he can be a game winner in and of himself, especially if you have Overrun in your hand. You know, let's just say the board got wiped clean. You just blocked a bunch of stuff, but you know, you have a bunch of mana out. You know, you just cast this guy, get a whole bunch of little 2/2 wolves on the field as well, and then the turn after that, cast Overrun, and then boom, win. So I definitely keep the Wolfbriar Elemental in. He can come in handy, you know, in a lot of situations. The Copperhoof Vorak. You know, I've seen this guy get huge before, and a lot of times it'll force your opponent to use mana and attack with creatures or whatnot, you know, when he would rather not do that, simply because he knows this guy's going to get huge. You know, and that can be great, but then other times I've seen this guy just could be completely useless, you know, as a 5-drop 2/2, you know, and the guy and your opponent has like maybe one untapped land or one untapped creature to defend or something, and he just becomes a 3/3. I mean, he's just, I've seen the situations too often where he's just useless. So I don't like keeping him in the deck just for that reason, because he costs too much, 5-drop. So I remove him. All right. So here we have Garruk's Pack Leader. This is the card I was talking about earlier. This is why you want to keep in the Centaurs, and this is why you love the Garruk's Companions. Because whenever another creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield in your control, you get to draw a card. So a lot like Heartwood Storyteller, you know, in some sense, it's another draw, you know, a drawing card, another card that allows you to get card advantage. And that's the reason I keep him in. He's a 5-drop for a 4/4. Sure, that's, you know, a little weak, but his ability definitely makes up for that. And the #1 reason for having these cards, you know, this card and Heartwood Storyteller in the deck, is because you want to draw Overrun. That is the #1 card you want to draw after you have creatures on the field. Speaking of which, this is Overrun. You do not want to remove this card from this deck. This is your #1 win condition here. And like I said, this deck is already slightly underpowered for this metagame. But if you can get enough creatures on the battlefield and you draw this card, there's, you know, there isn't a whole lot your opponent can do. I mean, sure, there are a few situations where your opponent can wipe the board, you know, or kill off just enough creatures of yours to make this, you know, pointless or whatnot. But in most situations, getting +3/+3 on every single one of your creatures with trample is just deadly. Just deadly. If it doesn't kill your opponent, it will severely injure him enough to take him out. So hey, look, speaking of which, we have 60 cards now. This is exactly, I'll just go ahead and explain the rest of the cards why I kept them in here. This is probably one of the next cards I would have removed, honestly. He's a 5-drop for a 5/3, and I mean, if it was 5/5 trample, fantastic. I mean, that would be great. But you know, his 3 defense kind of limits him a little bit. He can get killed off way too easily. He can get killed off by burn spells. It doesn't take a big creature to kill him off. So, he's not the greatest, but I keep him in here because the trample effect can really come in handy in certain situations. And you know, I mean, heck, he's a big creature. He's a big 5-power creature when you get Overrun too. So, I mean, he becomes an 8/6 creature with Overrun. So, I mean, that's great. So he does a lot of damage. That's the main reason I keep this guy. Terra Stomper. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you should take this guy out. He's 6 mana, but he's 8/8 trample, and he can't be countered. Fantastic card. Definitely keep him. He's a game winner in and of himself, even without Overrun sometimes. So he's kind of like your secondary win condition. He's one of your secondary win conditions. Along with this guy here, Engulfing Slagworm. He's a 7-drop for a 7/7, which is already, you know, decent. It's moderate. But his ability, oh my gosh, his ability is fantastic. Once you have this guy on the board, your opponent's, he's going to have to think twice before he ever attacks or blocks, because this Engulfing Slagworm is fantastic. So, I mean, if anybody blocks him or he blocks anybody else, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness, and he's destroyed. So it's just a fantastic card. And of course, last, we have Gaia's Revenge. Another 7-drop for an 8/5 creature. That's pretty decent. But what's even better is that he can't be countered. He has haste, and this is the best thing. He's kind of got like his own, you know, shroud ability in some sense, but he can only be targeted by green spells, or non-green sources. So he's basically got protection from every color but green. So that's awesome, and he's definitely worth it. And he's another one of your win conditions as well. But that's it, guys. That's Apex Predators for you. And like I said, this deck can be a whole lot of fun if played right. You know, if built right and played right. And you know, it's not the strongest deck in the game, but guys, it's worth it, man. It's worth playing with. It's if you just stick with one deck in this game, you know, it gets kind of boring after a while. So try them all out. Have fun, guys, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye bye.